If you thought you were having a productive day in the garden, listen to this. Ethiopia has planted 350 million trees in just one day. It was a project led by the Prime Minister of the country in an effort to counter the effects of deforestation and climate change. Joining me now is Noelle Keijzer. She's the CEO and co-founder of WeForest, an NGO dedicated to reforestation projects around the world, and Peter Kanowski, a professor of forestry at the ANU. Welcome to both of you.
Hello.
Noelle, I'm going to begin with you. How significant is this? 350 million trees in one day. I'm not a tree planter, but it sounds like a massive number.
Yes, it's huge. It's really big.
So why so many and why in one day? Tell me about the project.
Well, in one day, I think it's a very good way of raising attention and maybe competing with other countries that have pledged and actually done such a big number, like in India, remember, a couple of years ago. They also pledged and did 50 million in one day. But actually it goes much deeper, that Ethiopia really needs more trees. It has already identified, the problems of the droughts and poverty due to deforestation, soil erosion, loss of biodiversity for many years, and it's now taking it very seriously and supporting us in what we do over there.
Peter, how important are numbers? Is it quality over quantity, or is quantity actually a thing?
Quality really matters, and it matters in a number of different ways. Numbers are good for getting attention, and as Noelle said, it's an extraordinary achievement, but we really need to be planting the right trees in the right place for the right reason. And so that issue of how we translate those numbers into the sort of trees that people need to deliver environmental services in places that will benefit the environment and benefit people is really receiving a lot of parallel attention globally.
Noelle, the UN says Ethiopia's forest coverage declined from 35% of total land in the early 20th century to just over 4% in the 2000s. How significant is the problem of deforestation in Ethiopia?
It's massive, actually. The area where we work, which is in Tigray in the north and also in Amhara, more the center-west, those areas are totally degraded. People have been using the forest for just to live, because they have no light, they have no other cooking fuel, they make all kind of usage, obviously, of the forest, because that's all they have, and they're really very poor. So the focus is very much to not just plant trees. I think Peter said the right thing. It's about quality. What we like to say, it's not about planting trees, it's about growing trees. It's about protecting them. It's about selecting species that will be useful for the local people as well, because people need to protect them in the long term. If you just plant trees and go away, then what's going to happen to those trees? They're going to be cut again, just like it's been done before.
Peter, Ethiopia is a drought-prone country. The aim is to plant a total of 4 billion indigenous trees. What sort of difference might that make if that project's successful?
Well, picking up again on what Noelle has said, particularly in largely rural, partly subsistence-based economies and societies such as Ethiopia, it makes a very significant livelihood difference to people directly in ways that we're not so familiar with now in Australia. As recently as a decade ago, something like 95% of Ethiopia's energy came from biomass, and the majority of that was from wood fuel, and the majority of that was for cooking by mostly rural people. So one part of the difference it makes is for people's well-being. But of course, much of the motivation globally is to address climate change and to deliver the other ecosystem services that trees deliver, particularly their role in global hydrological cycles. We're now realising, for example, that many of the regional and hemispherical scale weather patterns, rainfall patterns, are dependent upon significant areas of forest. So there's a very local impact on people's livelihoods. There's a local impact on environmental services, but there's also a regional and global impact.
Noelle, Ethiopia isn't alone. There's a global effort, of course, to combat deforestation in this way. How critical are these efforts around the world, and who's doing it best?
Several countries have stepped up. I mentioned some of them before, India, Pakistan also. It is needed everywhere in the world. Ethiopia is just going to be part of the solution because, as you've seen in the last report from IPCC in October last year, what the world needs is roughly 1 trillion trees, actually. So that's a huge number, and it's hard to grasp for most of us. Basically, it's 33 billion trees a year. People often ask, is it possible? Do we have enough land? Is it not going to be competing with food? Well, actually, it's not, because we only need to restore half of the degraded farmland in the world, and much of it is in Australia, actually, very salty and very degraded soil. So we only need to restore half of the world's degraded farmland to get to where we need to go. Not only growing trees, but also protecting the trees that are there, because the best trees are the trees that are already there, that are old and that sequester carbon and that bring a lot of biodiversity. The new trees still have to prove themselves. They still have to grow.
Peter, is tree planting an effective way of tackling climate change?
It's an important part of the response. It's only part of the response, Patricia, and we need to be doing much more serious things than we're currently doing about our energy generation in this country. But we also, as Noelle said, have a great opportunity in Australia, which we've deforested about 40% of Australia since Europeans arrived. We've got landscapes that are degrading because of the impact of agricultural practices. 3 decades ago, we had a globally innovative response in land care. We really need to reinvest in community-based movements that work with farmers, that work with scientists, that work with government and the private sector, as land care can do, and really scale them up for the reasons that Noelle has mentioned. The Stern report back in about 2005, the British economist identified tree planting as one of the things that we could do that would start making a quick impact on greenhouse gas emissions because of the capacity of trees to sequester carbon. Climate change is running away on us, and we need really all hands on deck and all tools at our disposal to start addressing it.
And Noelle, are you encountering those forces in your work more broadly, these competing interests that are at play, I know, here in Australia with the agriculture industry, with industry broadly?
Not so much, actually. We're starting to see companies engaging in agriculture coming to us and saying, can you help us restore? Because we see that there is droughts and we cannot control what's happening. So they start to recognize that trees are going to be the solution also for agriculture. And it's actually, I would like to reinforce something that Peter just said. Just stopping emissions as it's really needed. We need to stop emitting emitting carbon dioxide due to fossil fuel consumption. That is very important, that's very urgent, but that's not going to be enough. We actually need to remove the excess CO2 from the atmosphere. And the best solution for that, the best technology for that are actually just simple trees. And that's been starting to be known now. It was 10 years ago, it was very early days, people just didn't get it, and now it's starting to be published by all scientists and covered by most press now. So we're very happy about that. The thing is, we cannot just talk about it. We have to make it happen, and we have to make it happen now, because we need to have absorbed this excess CO2 by 2050, as IPCC suggested. So we do need to plant every year starting now, and what Ethiopia is doing is amazing. It needs to be done everywhere. And actually, I would like to make a call for all the consumers that we are. For everything that we buy, for everything that we do, we should be selecting brands that are committing to protecting and restoring the world's forest, because that is then going to be super easy to do in terms of funding. It's not expensive. If everybody contributes, it's going to be done, and it's possible.
Thank you to both of you for joining us to have this conversation. We really appreciate your time.
Most welcome.
Thanks, PK. Always good to talk to another PK.
It is a good thing. Peter Kanowski is a professor of forestry at the ANU, and Noelle Keijzer, she's the CEO and co-founder of WeForest, an NGO dedicated to reforestation projects around the world. This is RN Drive.